One of the most intriguing subjects in both Buddhist philosophy and modern science is the nature of consciousness. Consciousness is that mysterious, intangible part of us that allows us to perceive, think, feel, and experience the world. In Buddhism, consciousness is seen as a complex and dynamic process, something that isn't fixed or singular, but rather a fluid, interconnected part of our experience. The Buddha spoke of consciousness as part of the 5 aggregates, which we discussed previously. Consciousness, or vijnana, is one of these 5 elements that make up our experience of self. But unlike the other aggregates, form, sensation, perception, and mental formations, consciousness serves as the foundation for our awareness of everything. It's like a mirror that reflects our thoughts, emotions, and perceptions, but it is not the source of these images. Instead, it is shaped and conditioned by them. Today, we'll explore how consciousness is understood in Buddhism, how it relates to concepts like self, awareness, and enlightenment, and how this understanding can guide us toward a more mindful and compassionate life. To begin, let's look at how consciousness is described in Buddhist teachings. In early Buddhism, consciousness is often discussed in relation to the 6 sense bases. The senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and the mind. Each sense has a corresponding form of consciousness. So when we see a flower, for example, it is the eye consciousness that arises in response to the visual object. Similarly, ear consciousness arises when we hear a sound, and so on. Each sense is linked to a specific consciousness, meaning that consciousness isn't a singular, overarching thing, but rather a series of processes that arise in response to stimuli. This understanding challenges our usual view of consciousness as something permanent or centralized. In our daily lives, we often think of consciousness as a stable core of self. I am aware, or I am thinking. But in Buddhism, consciousness is seen as momentary and dependent on conditions. It's like a flame that constantly changes as it burns. When we look closely, we realize that consciousness is more like a series of sparks, each one arising and passing away with each new experience. There is no fixed central self that is aware. Instead, awareness arises and dissolves continuously, responding to each new moment. This view of consciousness has profound implications for how we understand the self. If consciousness is constantly changing, then who are we? Buddhism suggests that there is no permanent me behind our awareness. There is only awareness itself, moment by moment. This insight, known as anta or no self, helps us see that our identity is not as solid or enduring as we might think. Rather than being a single, unchanging self, we are a dynamic flow of experience. One of the most powerful ways to experience this fluidity of consciousness is through meditation. In meditation, we observe our thoughts, emotions, and sensations as they arise and pass away. Over time, we begin to notice that there is no permanent self behind these experiences. There is only awareness, witnessing each moment without clinging or identification. This experience can be liberating, helping us let go of the need to defend or protect a fixed identity. Instead, we can approach life with openness and curiosity, flowing with each new experience. Let's try a brief meditation together to explore this. Take a comfortable seat, close your eyes, and take a few deep breaths. Bring your attention to the sensations in your body, the feeling of your breath, the weight of your body, or any areas of tension. Now, observe any thoughts that arise, noticing them as they come and go. You might find yourself thinking, I am feeling this, or I am thinking that. But instead of identifying with these thoughts, see if you can simply observe them as passing events, like clouds drifting across the sky. Notice how each thought or sensation arises, exists for a moment, and then dissolves, making way for the next experience. This is the nature of consciousness, ever-changing, never fixed. In Buddhist teachings, consciousness is often described as a stream. Just as a river flows continuously, changing with each drop of water, our consciousness is also in constant motion, shaped by our thoughts, actions, and experiences. But this stream of consciousness doesn't flow in isolation. It's deeply interconnected with the world around us. Our consciousness is influenced by the people we interact with, the environment we live in, and the choices we make. This interconnectedness is a reminder that we are not separate from the world, but part of a larger web of relationships. One story that illustrates this idea comes from the Jataka tales, stories of the Buddha's past lives. In one tale, the Buddha is reborn as a wise deer who guides his fellow animals with compassion and wisdom. The deer is conscious of each being's suffering and seeks to help them find peace. This tale reflects the Buddhist view that consciousness is not isolated, but deeply connected to others. Our awareness is shaped by our relationships, and in turn, our consciousness can influence others in positive or negative ways. The story of the wise deer reminds us that consciousness isn't just about individual awareness. It's also about how we relate to others and the compassion we cultivate. This understanding of interconnected consciousness is also echoed in modern psychology. Studies show that our mental states can affect those around us, creating ripple effects in our relationships. When we cultivate positive qualities like kindness, gratitude, and mindfulness, these qualities spread, enhancing the well-being of those we interact with. Our consciousness, then, is not just a private experience. It's part of a collective consciousness that shapes our communities and even society as a whole. Another key aspect of consciousness in Buddhism is the concept of vina, or discriminative consciousness. Vina is the part of consciousness that labels, judges, and categorizes experiences. It's what allows us to differentiate between objects and assign meaning to them. While vijnana is a valuable function, it can also create suffering when it leads us to cling to certain experiences or reject others. For example, when we encounter a pleasant experience, vijnana might label it as good and lead us to crave more of it. Conversely, when we encounter an unpleasant experience, vijnana might label it as bad, leading us to push it away. The Buddha taught that to find peace, we must go beyond discriminative consciousness. This doesn't mean we stop recognizing differences, but rather that we stop clinging to them. Instead of seeing the world through the lens of good and bad, me and mine, we cultivate a state of awareness that is open and non-judgmental. This state of awareness is known as pure consciousness or clear awareness. It's a form of consciousness that simply observes without attachment or aversion. Pure consciousness is often compared to a mirror. A mirror reflects whatever is placed in front of it without clinging to any image. When we cultivate pure consciousness, we develop the ability to observe our experiences without identifying with them. We see our thoughts, emotions, and sensations as reflections in the mirror of awareness, knowing that they are not the essence of who we are. One way to experience pure consciousness is through a meditation practice called bare attention. In bare attention, we observe our experience without labeling or judging it. For example, if a thought arises, we simply notice thinking without getting caught up in the content of the thought. If we feel a sensation, we notice feeling without labeling it as good or bad. This practice helps us see each experience as it is, free from the filters of preference and attachment. As you go through your day, you can bring this practice of bare attention to your everyday experiences. Try observing moments without labeling them as pleasant or unpleasant. Notice a sensation without needing to change it, or observe a thought without identifying with it. This practice helps us loosen the grip of discriminative consciousness, allowing us to experience life with a sense of openness and equanimity. The understanding of consciousness in Buddhism ultimately leads us to the realization of non-duality. Non-duality is the insight that there is no separation between self and other, subject and object. In our ordinary state of consciousness, we tend to see the world in dualistic terms. I am here, and the world is out there. But in deeper states of awareness, we begin to see that this separation is an illusion. Consciousness itself is non-dual. It is an interconnected field of awareness that includes all experiences without dividing them into me and not me. Non-duality is a profound insight because it dissolves the boundaries that create suffering. When we see ourselves as separate from others, we feel the need to protect, defend, or compete. But when we recognize that our consciousness is part of a larger whole, we can let go of this need. We see that what affects one person affects all, and we naturally develop compassion for others. Non-dual awareness helps us live in harmony with the world, recognizing our interdependence with all beings. As we come to the end of this exploration, let's take a moment to reflect on what it means to live with an awareness of consciousness as a dynamic, interconnected process. Imagine approaching life with a sense of openness, where each experience is simply a passing event in the stream of awareness. Picture yourself responding to challenges with equanimity, knowing that consciousness is like a mirror, reflecting each experience, and that each moment is an opportunity to cultivate awareness and compassion. When we see consciousness as a process, not a fixed I, we can engage with life in a way that is both profound and freeing. We no longer need to hold on to experiences or defend a rigid sense of self. Instead, we can embrace life's flow with grace and equanimity. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the nature of consciousness in Buddhism. I hope this episode has offered you insights into how consciousness is experienced and understood, and how this understanding can transform the way we live. In our next episode, we'll explore how to work with emotions in Buddhism, transforming anger, fear, and joy into tools for mindfulness and growth. Until then, may you find peace and clarity in the mirror of your awareness.